Hey, John Gilroy here. Everybody knows that 70% of the world's internet traffic goes through Ashburn, Virginia. Today, let's talk data centers. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator. Our guest in the virtual studio is John Reynolds, Director of QTS Federal. Talking data centers, John. Now, what do you know about data centers, huh?
Hey, John, great to be here. Thanks.
The correct answer is everything.
What do you want to know? That's
what do you want to know? I mean, I think everyone knows Ashburn, Virginia, full of data centers. You know, I think people in, Mississippi or, Oklahoma know full of data centers. And you and I, we live in the area. We've driven by there. Some people live there. And we have questions about it. But I think many of my listeners listen to me. They talk about software development and maybe encryption, and maybe they've driven by a mysterious data center. What's going on inside there? And I kind of wondered, I thought maybe we'd bring someone like you in and say, well, John, maybe you can explain for the software developers out there and the people involved in identity management, what's going on behind those walls, and there's walls and fences and everything else. I'm going to start off with this federal question, and then we can run from there. I like to talk about John's Donuts in Cleveland, Ohio. And, hey, John's Donuts, we have some space in the data center. Who cares? However, your clients are more like the DOD and maybe some other agencies. So how is the security different at a QTS data center that handles this federal stuff?
Yeah, John, thanks again for having me. I'll start off with saying, we're located here. Our headquarters is in Ashburn, Virginia. That's the data center capital of the world, right? Significant presence by QTS and a lot of other data center providers. Quick snapshot of QTS. So we're a digital infrastructure provider. We have over 20 years of experience, designing, building, operating high-performance data centers for some of the largest and fastest growing companies all over the world. The data center industry is growing right now at such a rapid pace. When I joined QTS about 3 years ago, we had around 30 data centers. Now we have about 75 data centers, either under operation or development between the U.S. and Europe. And that growth has been fueled by so much technology, just evolution over the past couple of years. For QTS to be able to manage some of that, we were taken private by Blackstone in 2021 as part of their real estate and infrastructure portfolio. And what that did is really it helped us grow and scale our data center infrastructure to help be prepared for the surge that we're seeing right now with AI and high performance compute and some of those other capabilities. And just being sure that we had the capital and the strategic backing to be able to do this rapid expansion to meet the needs. And those needs kind of directly flow into what we're doing at QTS Federal. So QTS Federal is a wholly owned subsidiary of QTS Data Centers. And you mentioned security, you mentioned federal requirements. We have a really rigorous approach to where security is the absolute cornerstone and foundation of our product here. So yes, we need high performance facilities, but security is embedded into everything, especially for these federal customers. You know how paramount that is, in all of your podcasts and talks that you do with your customers. So what we're doing is we're doing purpose-built federal only facilities to enable the mission in locations all across the U.S. It's critical for us to be able to do that and be able to provide availability zones and latency capabilities kind of across the U.S. wherever our customers are dictating that need. And so we leverage multiple layers of security. We have the physical, technical, environmental controls. We have things like biometric access. It's kind of like Fort Knox getting into some of these facilities from the outside gate all the way before you get back into where you actually get to a server. 24/7 surveillance and advanced cybersecurity protocols that we leverage, across all of these facilities. And we really focus on making sure that we have an expert team. We have about 80 folks specifically focused on QTS Federal, which includes government security professionals and folks that really just provide invaluable insider perspective into how the government operates and how they need to operate their data centers.
Well, John, I'm one of these weirdos who've been in my share of data centers. And when I first started touring them, I was amazed at your backup I mean, you don't realize the kind of backup these places have. I mean, if you have that kind of power in there and you have some type of service level agreement, you have to have backup there. And so people don't realize that, but you're really prepared for backup, and you can handle a slow disruption, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as part of our business, we have to think about it less as backup and more just like the resilience that's built into the core DNA of our product. So we have power redundancy that's engineered into our infrastructure, multi-layered redundancy. So in a single facility, we have power feeds coming in from multiple locations. If there were to be a situation where the power grid has an issue and it goes down, we then have these uninterruptible power supplies that immediately pick up a customer's workload so that they don't go down. So if you can think of our customer set, right, we have cloud service providers, social media companies, all of those things where if there's an outage, there's a significant business impact. And in the federal space, there's significant mission impact to those as well. And then backing those up, we have these massive generator farms to be able to carry that load almost indefinitely until the power grid kind of comes back on for whatever location that's in. And so we really have this forward-looking, proactive power strategy where we go out and when we're procuring land, we're also procuring these power contracts. So we have multiple energy contracts in place to help us scale and support our customers' growing needs. And then we also have equipment that we've bought years in advance to meet future technology demands. So those uninterruptible power supplies or UPSs and the generators, we have those stockpiled to be able to come in and meet whatever need our customers have to help them scale and maintain power uptime.
I did my sophisticated research. I went to your LinkedIn profile. Wow, great experience. And on your little headline right below your picture, it talks about federal compliance. Okay, yep. So when I think of compliance, to tell you the truth, I think of certain checklists from NIST and down. I never think that a data center has a whole checklist for compliance too. So is NIST responsible for that? Are there maybe groups you participate in to make sure that you meet? But I never think of compliance in a data center. I figure, well, yeah, of course, but it's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely a thing. I mean, I think a lot of folks think of ATOs, right? And so obviously ATOs are paramount for federal government systems and applications. All of those applications have to meet these stringent security and compliance requirements. If you take a step into how QTS has a role there, we're an infrastructure provider. So we're not directly responsible for an agency's ATOs or that process, but we're more of an enabling function. And so if you think about what we're doing, we're providing secure, compliant, pre-vetted underlying infrastructure that enables those ATOs to be processed more efficiently. And if it's FedRAMP or if it's some other type of certification that someone needs, there's a mapping to these NIST controls and adherence that QTS is responsible for. So we do rigorous assessments, documentation, and monitoring that all goes into the package that supports that overall kind of compliance framework. And so we take these purpose-built federal facilities and make it as easy as possible for agencies and organizations to streamline their ATOs when they're leveraging one of our facilities.
You've got a couple decades experience, and maybe 10 years ago, maybe you're cutting the grass, talking to your neighbor. They would never mention, chips. Yep. They would never mention artificial intelligence. They'd never mention NVIDIA. I mean, if you said NVIDIA 10 years ago, was that like a Martian thing? Is that like a physics program or something? I mean, so now, this is almost like common conversation. You go to Ford's Fish Shack in Ashburn, of course you expect it, but it's common talk. In fact, there are books that are written about chips, and people read them and talk about them all the time. So before the interview here, you start talking about groups you're involved with. You're involved with groups like Microsoft and NVIDIA. I mean, this is really going to be a bleeding edge type of a job you have, isn't it, John?
Yeah, you hit on an exciting topic there. I was sharing with you before, if you look at data centers 3 years ago, not very exciting. When I came into this realm, I had a lot of previous federal experience, and I was starting to see some of the trends that were developing in terms of the federal government kind of taking on these new technology capabilities. And we weren't really able to foresee what was coming. But the rapid demand that we've seen out of AI and technology growth has really put a serious increase on the need for data center infrastructure here in the U.S. QTS has invested $1.5 billion over the last 5 years into existing infrastructure purely for the federal government, technology companies, systems integrators that are supporting the federal government. We have another $3 billion earmarked for new federal-only infrastructure. So that's new. That's different, right? And so what I was mentioning earlier is that during the last administration, there was this White House AI data center infrastructure task force that was developed with QTS, NVIDIA, OpenAI, some other hyperscalers. And what it was really there for, it hit the limelight because there was a need to, keep up in this great power competition for AI and our competitors. So we have now a seat at the table, being able to influence the scale and the policy and the strategy and just transparency around infrastructure that's supporting this new technology and capability that is so instrumental and impactful to our daily lives. We're seeing these workloads right now. When you talk about AI or high performance compute, requires massive data, massive power, uninterrupted connectivity. All those things are critical to be able to provide those services out there. And you mentioned NVIDIA, their GPUs are effectively AI engines, and they have these huge power cooling needs. Jensen Wang was talking about a 600 kilowatt server rack based on some of the new technology that they have. And to put that in comparison, kind of standard IT workloads today range between 6 and 16 kilowatts. But he's talking about 600 kilowatts, right?
Yeah.
Talking about potentially server racks that are going to be megawatts of power. So it's a lot of electricity talk, but those are real requirements that folks have. If you look at OpenAI, their large language models have colossal compute demand in order to be able to run effectively. And then you get into the hyperscalers like Microsoft and Google and some of the AI platforms they have. It's just so much compute power that goes into those solutions to where all of this is top of mind right now and really critical to have that underlying infrastructure to be able to support it. And we can even look at, hardware OEMs like Dell and HPE that have this enterprise hardware that is really focused now on liquid cooling and high density solutions that's fueling a lot of these applications. I'd be remiss if I didn't say we have all these things going on in private sector, and we're seeing all these advances, ChatGPT, Gemini, all these solutions. And we know generally that government somewhat trails the private sector in terms of adoption due to procurement and legacy systems. But what I think we're seeing right now at kind of the bleeding edge in terms of liquid cooling, rapid deployment, high power densities will eventually be the federal standard. And so what QTS is trying to do is making sure we have the appropriate inventory reserved for the federal government so that they can fully scale into that without missing a beat. Yeah. And so we're really trying to bridge the gap there, John, leveraging our as a service model to allow for, rapid scaling of federal missions and giving them access to cutting edge infrastructure.
I'm going to take a word from my world and see where it fits in your world. People talk about hybrid architecture and hybrid cloud. Mm-hmm. You mentioned a couple of cloud providers there earlier. So from my perspective, a hybrid cloud is virtual. It's done with software. But is that true in your world? Does a hybrid cloud in your world mean one physical, maybe the federal government requires that, one physical location for a server? Or so what's hybrid cloud mean in your world?
Yeah, I think it means a few things that sometimes it get mixed in, right? So there's hybrid cloud, there's multi-cloud. I think what we see out of the federal government right now is there's an approach where a lot of things are going to the cloud, but the hybrid component of that is they're also doing things in a private cloud environment. Think of some of these agencies and organizations that say, I need an AI environment that I'm not going to sit in a commercial cloud, but I want it purely dedicated to my data and my mission set. So that could look like a hybrid version. And also we have these federal agencies that have said, I don't want to be in the business of building a data center anymore. I'm going to put my infrastructure in a facility like QTS's, and that becomes part of that hybrid strategy as well. So we have a couple of different ways it can look in terms of how these organizations are leveraging a hybrid methodology or strategy in order to get mission needs accomplished across whatever their portfolio looks like.
So when a federal agency needs to make a transition to a hybrid cloud, I would think that they deal mostly with their software consultants, software providers. And so where would you fit in the discussion? I mean, so we're going to bring in John Reynolds because we have to make this transition out to QTS. So are you part of the discussion, or are you just part of maybe a Booz Allen initial foray into this?
Yeah. I think where QTS plays is a few different realms. So sometimes we will have a play directly with an agency saying they're looking to migrate some solutions and they need an environment that they're going to host, they're going to manage themselves, and it could be in one of our facilities. But obviously, you mentioned a systems integrator where they might have a capability that they're providing to the government. So a Booz Allen or a Leidos might have a capability where they need data center infrastructure to support that as well, and they're providing that capability out to the government. But then also you could look at a software provider or a cloud service provider, and they need places to host their environments as well. And that's where QTS comes into play, where those become our customers, and we can provide them a federal compliant facility to be able to host those cloud services as well. So we kind of have that mixed approach to where if you look at John Reynolds' future of what federal compute and storage hosting looks like, you could have inside of a single facility a cloud service provider, a government agency, and a systems integrator, all interconnected in one building, and being able to do private AI, commercial cloud type capabilities, and then a systems integrator there managing a specific program for the federal government. So we end up landing in all those conversations.
Okay, now we're going to talk about Ohio. In October, I drove to Ohio to interview a PhD at Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, and Woody Allen. And what I read in the newspaper, talking to people, apparently there's a lot of growth in technology in Columbus, and Amazon is locating some data centers there. And so are we running out of room here in Ashburn? Are people looking at other parts of the country, North Carolina, Ohio? So what is the 5-10 year plan here when you look at, is it maxed out? Is it running out of power, running out of coolant? What is the position of data centers here in Northern Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about scale when you're mentioning that, right? And so I don't know if you remember several years ago when the local utility company here in Loudoun County, kind of the data center capital of the world, said, hey, no more data centers. And so that put a real halt on things. And so, we've seen these secondary markets start to pop up, and they're starting to look now more like primary markets. And we've seen these tertiary markets pop up, where places where you never thought there would be a data center, and they're becoming these secondary markets now. So our expansion that we have and the rest of the community has is in these locations where we never really expected to have these massive hubs, right? So there's a lot that goes into that. It's really a multifaceted strategy but it's imperative, right? We have to scale our business because it's critical for our customers' ability to scale their business and their solutions and meet their mission needs. So I can't have a situation where a customer comes to me and says, hey, John, I need some power capacity. Can you go find that for me, right? I'm not going to then say, okay, now I need to go find land. I need a power contract. I need to get the equipment there. Like, we always have to be forward thinking in that. So we have these strategies that are going out, and the supply chain that's going out, 5, 7, 10 years in advance, saying, where do I need a land bank? Where do I need to proactively go out and acquire buildable land that I can permit a data center on in key mission locations years in advance? What's the design of my facility and the supply chain associated with that, so that I can have standardized equipment across these facilities, and I can buy this equipment years in advance and stockpile it, so that I don't run into supply chain issues like we had in COVID, where I can't scale for a customer because I don't have the necessary equipment in stock. And then one of the big things that's happened lately, John, that you mentioned, Ohio, power prioritization. So the ability to go into a location and secure an energy contract and ensure that they can actually deliver that energy to your facility, to your campus, is more paramount now than it's ever been. So we go in and we have dedicated teams focused on these energy contracts, making sure that we have the capacity there to fuel our campuses. And a campus years ago might have been a single building at 20 megawatts. Now we're going in and we're saying, I need a campus that can be 500 megawatts or a gigawatt of power in a single area. So these utility companies are really facing challenges about transmission lines and how they can provide that capability out to these data center providers or cloud service providers that are building these data centers in these new markets. And it's a big growing curve. And I think what we're positioned to do is leverage these pre-positioned, locations and facilities to provide secure, as a service environments to the federal government and their customers. And being on that task force that I mentioned earlier really gives us the ability to influence federal and local governments and align with the national strategy to be sure that we can continue to scale and do those things appropriately to meet the need. One thing I'll throw in there as well is we can't do any of that. Ohio, Georgia, all these new markets that folks are kind of expanding into. There's a big piece related to community engagement and stewardship that's really paramount in our scaling as well. And we have teams of folks that focus on government relations to understand the needs of the areas that we're going to be working and building these data centers in. And then QTS, one of the things that I love about this company is that we invest in programs and projects to really better the communities where our data centers are located. Some of the organizations that we support are focused on the food insecure, local emergency services, veterans group. Here in Loudoun County, we partner heavily with like Loudoun Hunger Relief, things of that nature. But then there's also the stewardship component, right? So we have to be responsible to the communities that we serve and serve them well. And part of that is with economic development, making sure that we bring in jobs into the area, and the others resources like water, making sure that we have a design that's appropriate there.
And you can go to qtsdatacenters.com and just read all about it. They have a brand new logo. It's a great looking site. I'm amazed at how much they give back to the community. In fact, they talk about their facilities, but they talk about how much you give back to the community. Then they talk about so many different things. It sounds like a real solid company, Midwest, kind of solid. So, John, I'm going to take you from Ohio to Europe.
All right.
We're going to go to Netherlands. And at your website, it looks like you guys have a presence in UK and Netherlands. I'm saying to myself, Netherlands? Where are they going to get any room for a data center in Netherlands? I mean, it's all near the water. I mean, you can't dig down. So is that way beyond your ability to answer something? How did you do that?
Yeah, so we've had a time in our company's history where we acquired some locations, and then we're doing some expansion as well. But if you look at the Netherlands, part of the big piece of that location is, you're probably familiar with subsea cables, right? There are locations that flow from Virginia across the Atlantic and hit certain locations there. So having that footprint there is really critical to us. I mentioned earlier that we were taken private by Blackstone. We already had these 2 locations in the Netherlands, but now we're doing this massive expansion into Europe because Blackstone said, hey, there's demand there. And we want QTS to be able to take the brand and the expertise that it's built in the U.S. and leverage in the Netherlands and further expand into Europe. And so we've been on this process over the past couple of years of really understanding that and growing that. We have a London office now. So we're really expanding that footprint, again, to meet the needs of our customers' requirements as they continue to scale and grow their solutions overseas as well.
I think of May East and May West, and the reason, but what is this, May Belgium or May Netherlands? I mean, what's it called over there? Does it have a special name too? MAE something?
Well, what's interesting, John, is what we see in a lot of these areas overseas is a sovereign need, right, for capabilities. So really hard to go into one country and say, hey, I'm going to provide some data center capabilities where data from other countries are going to flow into that one location. Yeah. So, data sovereignty in that region is extremely important. So having data centers in those different locations to be able to host that nation's data is an imperative for us. So we're trying to be as front-footed as possible to be able to have resources there so that our cloud service providers or whoever our customers are that need the governments there can host their data appropriately with data sovereignty in mind. Good.
So cast your eyes into the future here. We're not going to talk about Europe or Ohio or Kansas. What about this area here in the next few years? You think it's going to kind of plateau as far as data center construction goes, and then they maybe just have mirror images throughout the country? Or so 3 or 5 years from now, where do you see this all going?
Yeah, I think 5 years from now, folks already have a good understanding of where they're buying, developing land for future data center usage. I think the thing that is most uncertain is what type of alternative methods are being used for power supply, right? Right now, it's hard to have a lot of these conversations without saying, hey, well, I don't want to be focused just on the grid. So you probably saw, companies are buying former nuclear plants to be able to have energy supply. Folks are looking at things like fuel cells or diesel turbines to be able to have alternative fuel supply. So all that is really critical in terms of how folks are going to develop here in the next 3 to 5 years in some of these markets. When I said earlier, some of these utility companies can't surge and meet the demand, we're all in a situation now where we're looking at what are these alternative resources to be able to provide power to these facilities that isn't leveraging the local utility.
Yeah, yeah. And who'd have thunk it? I mean, the people, if you talk to people in NVIDIA, in fact, the guy you mentioned earlier, what he said was, hey, Moore's Law is over. We beat that. The real issue now is power. Mm-hmm. And maybe we'll come back in a year and power update with John Reynolds from QTS, because that really seems to be what everyone's talking about when and the concept of nuclear power actually gets back into the conversation after 20 or 30 years. It's going to be a great, I think you position yourself in a great place in the next 5 to 10 years because you're going to be the center of everything. It's going to be very exciting, John.
Yeah, it's going to be dynamic to understand what we can do. I mentioned earlier that stewardship we have in these communities, we still have to keep that top of mind, right? A data center coming into someone's backyard is one thing, but a nuclear power plant is a separate thing. So, how do we do all this? How do we scale appropriately and manage relationship with the communities and their needs and interests as well?
Well, unfortunately, John, we're running out of time here. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, John Reynolds, Director at QTS Federal. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate the time, the engaging conversation, and being able to highlight some of QTS's capabilities in this market.